In this episode of the Exploring Information Security Podcast, how to perform incident response and forensics on drones.
Computers now have primary control of critical functions.
Houston, recommend vector transfer.
Your go for APU shutdown on time.
Roger, go for deploy.
Nice to be in orbit.
Welcome to the Exploring Information Security Podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I am your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we will be exploring how to perform incident response and forensics on drones. With me to do that is Wayne Burke, a leading expert in the cutting-edge field of drone tactical forensics and incident response. Wayne will share his unique insights on everything from the proliferation of drones in our society to the surprising dangers and advanced techniques involved in uncovering their secrets. Show notes can be found at exploresec.com/EIS. Feedback for the show, timothy.dblock@exploresec.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. If you want to connect, just add a note to the connection and I'll happily add you. You can also help to grow the podcast by rating it on your favorite podcast platform. Show Me Con is next week. So this is the final episode right before Show Me Con. I'm releasing 2 this week. I will probably do like a re-release next week. So this will be it, but I will be at Show Me Con and I'll be doing some content there as well too. I know I've got at least 2 episodes I'm planning to record while I'm at the conference, maybe a couple more too. So you might see some content afterwards around some of the different stuff going on there. And then, again, I try to tie it in so people can get an understanding of what's going on in the field. Again, if you haven't signed up for a ticket, sign up for the conference. It's a really great one, great opportunity, great venue, great food. The organizers really take care of you, both from a speaker and an attendee perspective. And it's just a really great time. So looking forward to that next week. So I will be there. This was a really interesting episode with Wayne around drone forensics and incident response. Never even thought about it, but he kind of talks about it from both a military, but then also from these cars driving around on the streets and, getting forensics and incident response from that kind of stuff. So really fascinating episode. I'm not going to really blather on much more because let's just get right into it.
And you've got a very interesting one, right? Because it's like pretty much drone tactical forensics and incident response, right? So like, what is that?
Well, basically, right now with what's going on with drones, it might be a drone that's operated by law enforcement or, criminals, and you collect forensic evidence from that drone as quick as you can because time is of essence, right? You've got the remote control, you've got the drone, you've got the operator, and obviously you've got a short amount of time to collect evidence to try and figure out who's the operator, who's the root cause of this impact. So the sheer uptick on automated robotics. You got the White House that's got their little robotics patrolling the grounds, as an example. And so if any one of those devices is targeted, it could be a group of, criminal hackers trying to target that device to neutralize it, obviously, so it's not going to collect any evidence of whatever they're trying to do. You've got to be very tactful in collecting that forensic evidence. So I come from a law enforcement background, rapid response. So I was in a specialist unit, and we do a lot of federal work with federal organizations, government contracting organizations, and military law enforcement, search and rescue, fire, you name it.
Yeah, that's interesting because I it's not something I've heard about in the news a whole lot, but it sounds like, especially if you're making kind of like a career out of this, right? And I didn't even realize the White House had drones. It makes sense to me, right? Because they're kind of just flying around monitoring. You can probably automate, like there's not an individual person doing all that. And then obviously, I think with your talk, you talk about Ukraine and Russia. We've seen, I think, some of the stuff there, but didn't even realize that it's used for both. I know we've kind of talked about the bad side, right? I was reading an article about the whistleblower for the NLRB case, right, where Doge came in and the guy whistleblowed, and then he got drone footage, and a note taped to his door, saying we're watching you, of him walking in his neighborhood. So from an extortion standpoint, that's wild. I mean, and you hear about it in like the retail space, but I've never thought about it from a, I guess, defense. So like, I guess maybe take a step back, like how pronounced and how wide is this actually being used right now?
Well, I can't talk about all of those things though, but
sure,
when you start looking at like the White House right now, there's a lot of pissed off Americans. There's a lot of happy Americans, but there's also a lot of pissed off Americans. Depends on which side of, are you blue, red, green, pink, black, whatever. But the sheer uptick on drones being used for all sorts of things has just, 10 years ago when I started on this trajectory, it was, yes, let's go and do some object recognition with AI and cool things. And we did it and nobody was interested. So everything went dead for years. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 or 3 years, everybody wants some kind of automated robot drone doing something. And so this is the part where accidents happen. The drone's going to hit some kind of a wire, as an example, and it's going to fall on somebody's head. Now you're going to have to go and collect forensic evidence, because who's to blame? Is it the vendor? Is it the operator? Is it a malfunction? So there's all these new laws with artificial intelligence as well, where we're not realizing that AI is amazing, but guess what? It lies because it doesn't want to say, I don't know. So it's going to hallucinate. So all of the things that we have, we've got to verify and validate through a human presence, because look at these driverless motor vehicles, the taxis. We're going to have huge issues with those as well, because again, you've got somebody in some remote operation center monitoring that vehicle, but they may fall asleep because they're in some call center, right? So they've got the controls, like virtual controls, to stop that vehicle if something happens. But if there is an accident, like I said again, was it a malfunction of the equipment? Was it a user operator issue? Or what? And that's why we call it tactical forensics, because we got to go in and figure out what the hell happened. Was it the machine? And most of the times, everybody wants to blame the machine.
Right, but it could have been something messing with it. Yeah, absolutely.
And we know 95% of the time it's operator error. They fell asleep.
Yeah,
they fell asleep. They didn't notice that there was an issue. They fell asleep. So you've got to use various tactics to get to the root cause of that scenario.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up cars, because as you were talking, I was thinking like how I was thinking this is like the flying drones, right? Because we've had around everyone, there's consumer grades that people have and other stuff, and people are playing with that. But like, you're absolutely right. So it sounds like the scope of this is just cars, actual drones flying around that White House. But like, what other drones would you, or what else would you consider as classified as drones?
Robotic dogs. So they actually have those really awesome dogs as well, patrolling the grounds of the White House. And then they've even got drivable, like remote control motor cars, but they're all strapped with sensors. So those dogs are great, but they don't have the same speed that you could do with a remotely operated vehicle. It's literally like a mini tank that you can use from, the lower end range all the way up to the higher end range with hydro cells and you name it. So those robots are like, for surveillance, $1 million up. They're not cheap.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize they were using dog drones either. I was thinking of the fly ones, but that makes sense again too. You want to cover the air, the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably have some water drones somewhere.
Well, I'm open-minded, because the things that we can think of, is one side of the spectrum. But then when we're looking at AI coming up with its ideas, I'm going like, the human didn't think of it. It was based on the AI large language models that came up with based on the statistics. Well, actually, and inventing stuff that we didn't even think of.
Yeah, that's wild. What is a unique story you can share that comes to mind, like regarding forensics and incident responses as far as drones go?
We were in a foreign European country. I can't state which country we were in. We were just doing, simple search surveillance of the environment that we're looking to do work in. And we wanted to get a feel for what elements are we going to be dealing with. We're not worried about government, law enforcement. We're worried about criminal syndicates. And literally after about 3 minutes, I'll be showing some footage at the conference of this. All of a sudden, my heads-up display, my first-person view goggles, I was starting to notice this little flash of green light every now and then. I was going like, oh, that's weird. Where's this green light coming from? It was a civilian criminal cell ground station laser system on the ground, literally tracking our drone. And so within a minute after that, after I noticed the flashing green light it was trying to get a lock on my camera because it didn't want us flying around that area. There was a casino very close by, which ties in really well with what's going to be happening at the Merrick Casino in Showmicon, right? So we had to get our drone the hell out there because you will actually see on the video footage I'll be showing, the gimbal was hit. They got a lock on the camera long enough. The gimbal just dropped. And any longer, my drone would have dropped. So, that was probably one of the awakening I had with, new age terrorist, criminal cell, syndicate electronic warfare using certain kinetics as well.
Yeah, so they're already kind of using that stuff, which is absolutely wild to me. Now, when something, does it just fall out of the sky then, like with some sort of like pulse, or like do you shoot it with a missile? Like how would they have taken it down?
Well, if they lock onto your flight controller long enough, your drone's going to freak out. So they start drone on drones, or they might use a drone mothership with small little drones that fly around and create a triangulated radio frequency, literally just drown any radio frequency operation in that triangle. So you're going to see them drop out the sky. I've seen them start tumbling. I've been able to recover and continue flight, but very few. 80% of the time, once it starts tumbling, it's going to hit the ground.
Gotcha. So as far as like the forensics and incident response, like how do you start? Like what's the starting point there as far as like you have the drone that you need to now figure out what happened here? Like what's your starting point?
Well, I'm going to start off with some examples because we've got a lot of the latest from the battlefield of what they're doing in Ukraine and Russia, right? So as soon as, let's say, they've intercepted a drone and they've downed it, whether it be through a handheld launched net, as an example, they've downed it, they've deactivated the improvised explosive device, and now they're going to figure out where it came from because they know there's a lot more, drone operators ready to launch the next kamikaze drone. So we're going to be dropping into the flight controller as quick as we can, look to see if they've got any protection. Very often now they're a lot sharper, but when they first started doing a lot more of these operations, we were able to literally jump into the flight controller software and actually detect exactly where they were coming from because by default they had login enabled. So we could see the exact flight path that the operator was located in, and we could then send our drones or our incident response team to that location to where the operators were originally operating that drone. So you're going to be looking to collect forensic evidence from the actual drone itself. And we've got dedicated different types of Raspberry Pis with different operating systems pre-configured. So if we're going to be dealing with the vendor A flight controller, great. Like if it's a DJI drone as an example, pretty easy and slick to do. But if it's custom made drones, that's where you're going to have to actually improvise with your forensic evidence collection. So there's no one simple tool, plug it in, suck the information off, and good to go. You've got to have literally your incident response toolkit that's going to allow you to very rapidly pull out your device that you're going to use to extract and collect your forensic evidence. Because if you turn that drone off, and this is the kicker, very often they've intercepted the drone as it was in flight. So the drone's still on, the battery's still got power. They're not recycling that. As soon as you recycle that and you plug the battery out, evidence gone.
Yeah. What is IED? Because I know what it means, but for the audience that might not know, what is that acronym?
Improvised explosive device.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to call that out because I don't think like people would realize like that's an explosive. So like, how are you handling the explosive piece of it?
Well, so you're dealing with two things, right? First of all, the battery can be highly explosive in its design, and they'll booby-trap the batteries. So you've got to be very careful when you're dealing with these types of, especially when they're flying the drones over prisons and they're delivering their loot to prisons, whether it be cigarettes, weed, or whatever else, weapons, cell phones, they drop anything to think of. So it's the improvised explosive device that they'll actually have in Russia, Ukraine, as an example, or they will actually have an improvised explosive device in the battery, so that if you try and collect forensic evidence, they don't want to have you track who they are, so it would then actually destroy the evidence, not blow them up, so to say, but if they don't disconnect the battery in a certain way, the battery's going to it's not going to go boom, it's going to start igniting, and then you'll have a long burn, up to 30 minutes, depends on how much battery lipo substance you actually have.
Yeah, so it's like a Mission Impossible, right? Where the agent gets hey, here's your mission, and then it just self-destructs. I mean, that's a very dramatized way, but it sounds exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so simple to do nowadays. If you learn a little bit about, how the light batteries function, they're highly combustible. So it doesn't take a lot. I mean, look at the example with the Lebanese pages, right? That was long-term.
Yeah.
So I don't want to bring those things in because you start freaking people out a bit with that stuff. But we'll stick with more the civilian type nature events.
Yeah. Well, that was targeting actual humans. This sounds like it's trying to self-destruct itself, so you can't collect that evidence.
Collect the evidence, exactly. Correct.
Yeah. So now that you have the log, like all the logs of the informational artifacts, like how do you analyze flight logs and telemetry data and things like that?
Yeah, I'm going to be demonstrating that, I always like to show people to get a lot more people involved in that industry, because right now it's going to go boom. And we're going to go like, oh, we don't have anybody that actually is ramped up on drone technologies. It's a flight controller. It's standard firmware running on hardware that's also standardized, but we don't have enough people. So we want to give them an example of using open source tools. I'll be demonstrating how they can use some of the open source forensic tools, from individual command line tools to Linux distributions that's got all of your open source digital forensic tools already built in. So we'll actually be showing them what tools they can get their hands dirty with, and give them some examples where the US, various different government organizations, the popular like top 50 manufactured commercial off-the-shelf drones, and did all of the forensic image acquisition on those drones. So I'll be showing a lot of those resources where people can say, okay, well, I don't have $100,000 to just go and buy all 20 or 30 popular vendor drones. So how do I learn the forensic side of this? That's where I'll be releasing some of that information where people can go and subscribe and request access to the pre-imaged system. So image of the drone, an image of the application that manages the drone, and an image of the remote control, typically of the areas of evidence.
Cool. What are some of the common challenges outside of IEDs you face with like extracting the data or getting, the artifacts you need to do the forensics?
Well, right now the Russians are using malware, so they'll actually plant malware on the flight controller.
Of course they are.
So as soon as you try and plug it into your computer, you don't realize it, but you've just been backdoored, and now they're going to figure out who the hell you are. So the challenges are to keep up with the technology that they're deploying super fast, that battlefield vetted. And so that's where the criminals are going like, oh, cool, I can just go and hang out on Telegram and listen to all the Russians and the Ukrainians and pull all of their manuals. The amount of stuff I've pulled off Telegram, I'm blown away. So I can literally take somebody who's a civilian and operationalize them into a first-person view pilot that's going to be flying a kamikaze drone with an IED. Those are the intricate details they have in those Telegram channels already.
Wow. Wow, that's wild. So I want to take another step back towards like when you're plugging in, because I feel like, is this like a USB-C connection or what kind of connection? I imagine like I've worked a little bit in forensics. You have like write blockers and things like that. How are you actually connecting to pull this stuff to kind of keep you safe from some of this other stuff? But then like, what's the actual connection?
Well, so some of the tools that I would use is I'm going to be using a voltage meter to see what kind of, so we will know as an example, it's all about experience, right? So when you want to plug in a DJI drone, you're going to know if there's something weird in the system, if it's drawing more power than what's normally the average, as an example. So yes, you're going to have your USB-C connectors, you're going to have your micro USB-D connectors. Those are the common ones. But then sometimes you're going to have the exposed, FTDI, UART, JTAG. You're going to have some of those connectors exposed where you can actually plug in your customized, electronics solution. So normally those are things we're doing in a forensic lab. We're not going to be doing those things in the field. Like a logic analyzer, you're not going to have time to go and use a logic analyzer when you're doing an instant response in the field. But if you have that device where you've now seized that and you're going to take it into the forensic lab, then you're going to be able to pull it apart. You're going to be able to do chip off of the actual flight controller. So if they've got hardened firmware encryption as an example, or defenses where you cannot even get to the firmware, most of the time we're going to have to do chip off. So we're going to have to actually desolder the actual chip, put it into our board where we're going to try and extract the whatever we can from that chip.
Yeah, that's wild. That takes me back to my Navy days. So I was in the Navy for 6 years, as an electronics technician. So I learned all about voltmeters, electricity. I even had I think it was I don't think it was a 3M program, but I did the soldering program as like my specialization. So I had to take apart, repair boards and other stuff. We would never use it in the Navy because really, if you didn't solder on like a circuit board, you broke the warranty. So it's like you just on a ship had the next. So I never would have used it. But it's why now that I'm like, I could have used it for that. We're doing drone forensics.
Well, it's funny. My partner in crime is a retired Navy chief. And so we work a lot with the Navy folks or the retired Navy folks as well. And man, the Navy can do their shit. Let me tell you something. So I'm always blown away with how much it is. Well, how much they train you to do things where you'll go like, why would I really need to use that? Well, you don't think about it, but until you go through and you go, oh, actually, I could use this in various different situations.
Yeah, one of the things, because I talk about people getting into cybersecurity, I'm like, look at the military routes. I mean, especially now with all the specializations, they didn't have those specializations when I was going through. They didn't have IT. I was an electronics technician again. But what that really taught me, I tell people, is I learned how to troubleshoot. So I had to learn how the electricity moved through the circuit board. So I have a very deep understanding about all this electronic stuff at like a board level.
And ask an electrician the basics of electricity. They haven't got a clue because they applied it through a theoretical model. They didn't realize that it's not actually electricity running on the wire. It's the field around the wire. Yeah. And that field could be manipulated by other interferences.
What would you like to plug?
I really do. Everything I do in this world, I've had a lot of near-death experiences. So everything I do in this world is to do good for me and others. So I'm not looking to plug anybody. I just want to give back to the community. Dave is an amazing guy. Show Me Con, he's bringing the world's best of the best of people all together. So, my plug is community wins always. So we all just chipping in to bring the community up to speed with things that could affect us all.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, Wayne, thank you for joining me to discuss. I don't even know what I'm going to call this one yet, but thank you for talking about like drone for tactical forensics and incident response. It was a great time, man. Really appreciate it.
All the best and appreciate your time and service, sir.